Welcome everybody joining to the Programmatic Digest podcast, a live panel. We have some fantastic guests on the pod today. We're gonna give everybody maybe a hot second to join via LinkedIn or YouTube. Let me just make sure that everybody on LinkedIn has the proper link here. Give me a minute if you're joining in. Thank you so much. We have an exciting conversation on social e-commerce. All right, there it is. Okay. All right, so I'll drop the link in LinkedIn just in case, because I remember the first panel I actually had people saying they couldn't join. So I wanted to make sure I take a hot second to do that. So thank you everybody for joining. Happy Monday, happy almost Thanksgiving, happy almost Christmas time. We have an exciting conversation today. I am your host, Ellen Parker. And I am the founder and creator of this podcast. And our mission is to share knowledge and highlight diversity. Today's conversation is going to be around social e-commerce. And this podcast is sponsored by Ellen Parker Consulting, which is the programmatic media solution agency I run. And we provide customizable training in programmatic media. We have two amazing guests today, Ebony Smith and Stacy Reed. I'm going to go ahead and allow you both to introduce yourself. So Ebony, would you do us the honor? Let us know, take a quick minute to introduce yourself. Tell us how you got here, and then anything we need to know about you.
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So my name is Ebony Smith, and I am a paid ad expert. And so I specialize in Facebook and Instagram. That's like what my favorite place to be. But I also have love for some of the other things like your display, your PPC, your LinkedIn, of course. And so that's why both of these ladies are some of my favorite ladies, because we always get to talk about our favorite things. And so I happen to run a VIP day and really just enjoy spending time with my kids and doing things outside to kind of take the stress off of running all these campaigns. But thank you again for the opportunity.
Yes, Stacy, let us know what I think you're muted. Okay, you're unmuted. Cool.
Hey y'all. Ooh, excuse me. Good morning. Happy Monday. I am just getting my day started. Okay. So good morning, y'all. My name is Stacy, and I'm a Facebook and Instagram ad strategist. I currently work mainly with e-commerce businesses, and I help them to go from that 6-figure level to 7 figures. I help them by creating strategic, sustainable campaigns that scale for sure. I also am a paid social ad expert at a company called Zappos. So I run the paid social media there. And so, yeah, it is Q4. It is crazy time. So we are all knees deep in, holiday season. So I'm super excited to talk to y'all about what we can do and what some people can do to definitely capitalize on that this winter. This holiday season. Yeah.
It's interesting because holidays are literally like now. And if you haven't had a chance yet to get onto it, maybe it's the time to get onto it and maximize this time. And the background of the podcast is very geared towards programmatic and ad tech world. But the reason why I really wanted to chat with you both this morning is because social e-commerce is taking over slowly but surely. There is a lot of things happening with Facebook's updates. Meta, which I'd love to hear your opinion on in a hot second here. But we really wanted to chat to you both because you are the leading expert in this industry, in my opinion. And so let's chat about e-commerce. So from a initial perspective or standpoint, what are things like myth about e-commerce? Because we know what e-commerce is, but what are myth when it comes to e-commerce advertising specifically, or how the best practices when it comes to e-commerce? So Stacy, you want to lead the charge?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the myths that sticks out to me, and I had a call with someone last week about this, and
Mhm.
I think a myth is that social ads in particular are going to save your business, or that they're a sure thing. They're
Mm.
like, that they're a sure thing, or that they're, you just turn them on and it just starts to rain money. But that's really not true, right? There's a lot of strategy that goes into it. There's a lot of testing that goes into it. It's really like making any kind of investment that you're going to make into your business, whether that's, investing in getting a website or investing in different ways to get traffic. It's an investment, and it takes strategy and it takes attention. So I would say if you are someone who really feels like your business is kind of going down the tubes and you're really just unsure of why, and you think that pivoting into ads is going to actually rebound that, I would say, maybe, but I would really say that if you're going into it with that kind of mindset, you're really going to miss out on the magic that is social e-commerce. Whereas you're learning so much about your customers, you're really starting to learn what messages resonate with what audiences. You're learning, what kinds of things people do when what kinds of feedback people have. You have so many different things that you can really test into, that really, if you're entering it with a mindset of I need to turn something on to save my business, then you're really kind of going to miss the magic of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I love what you said about like social e-commerce or social ads are not going to save your business. It's like more, and it's part of the strategy you need to look over. So, Ebony, what would be one myth that you've heard, maybe either in agreement with Stacy, that you point out to your clients, like, oh, actually, you want to make sure that this is happening and people understand this, but in reality, this is what's happening.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things too, and I kind of blame like the internet gurus for this one, is that people, especially those, the dude bros, they get so caught up in like the 10x, the 12x, the 50x, and all you have to do is do this one thing, and then it's so easy to just run an ad that gets you this many ROI, right?
Mhm.
And in reality, there's so many things that have to come together to work seamlessly together in order to get that kind of return.
True.
And a lot of people tend to forget about the landing page experience, especially for e-commerce. You can have the best ad in the world, but if they land on your landing page and it is a hot mess, it does not guide them where they need to go, you
That
will
part.
be pouring money like into a bucket that has a hole in it. And so
Mhm.
that's the last couple times on some of the projects that I worked for, I had to really guide, and some of my, I would say my other skills were transferable because I used to build websites. I was able to give
Mm.
context on the entire experience. So it's not just the ad, it's also the web, like the actual landing page. It's also your sales and how does your sales process work. It's also your customer service, like what happens when you go to deliver it. So there's a lot that goes into conversion. And typically when things aren't going well, they do typically come back and point to, well, it's because the ad's not working. And so that's one big myth
Mhm.
that I think they need to look at.
That's such a good point for sure. Because I think so. One of the things I was working on over the weekend for a client is mapping out their funnels and mapping out their customer journey. And it's a part of my
Mm.
framework. And because it's so important, right? Because like you can turn on ads, right, and have a high click through rate. But if your conversion rate sucks,
Yep.
then you're wasting your money, right? Like if your
Mhm.
people aren't taking the desired
Yeah.
action, there's always. So one of the things people can do is map that journey, right? Like when people, if you have people go from I have no idea who you are to please take my money and take it now. Like, what does that journey look like? And understand that your ads are going to be, they can push people through that funnel, right? You can have people at the top of the funnel. You can push people towards the bottom of the funnel.
Mhm.
But you really need some kind of container and some kind of journey that people are going to go on before you actually just turn on ads. Like, I don't like when people just turn on ads and just go to your homepage, right? Like,
Mhm.
if you have a fire homepage, that's great. But like, what is the journey? Like, what do you
Right.
want people to do? Don't expect people to just know, right? Or you just
Mm.
think people are naturally just going to do X, Y, and Z because, you send them to some kind of page. You really have to map that journey and guide people along that path. So I really love that, Ebony pointed that out because that's super important.
I love that, and thank you both for your comments, because in what I could hear, the common denominator here is diversify your strategy, but also understand where your consumers are spending time and how to communicate and connect with them. In speaking with that consumer journey perspective, I came across this article from the eMarketers, and it was about 3 new things in retail: loyalty program, app deco, and holiday shopping. And so almost 70% of consumer agree their loyalty is more difficult to maintain than ever, per Claris Commerce, and nearly 80% said they don't want to accumulate points, and that to maintain their loyalty program should provide immediate benefit. So something that's really popular in the e-commerce strategy or e-commerce from a client's perspective and brand's perspective is the fact that loyalty programs are popping up a lot. Like literally, even your coffee shop is like after 8 coffee, you get your 9th for free or your 10th for free. And that's considered loyalty. They're trying to bring you back into your doors. Traditionally, loyalty programs are supposed to help build that community that advocate for your brand. So what are your recommendation when it comes to implementing a loyalty program, especially during the holidays, and how brands can best benefit from a loyalty program? Like, what's the to-dos and the don'ts when it comes to implementing loyalty from our e-commerce perspective?
Gotcha. So I would say go big or go home. Like that is the way that I look at loyalty programs, because a lot of people don't want to do them anymore. They don't want to participate because
Right.
when you're playing a game, you don't want to play that game where no matter what you do, it's impossible to win. Like those are going to be the games that you really end up putting to the side. You may go back and try it again, but if you can seed it with the reward, somebody who does this really well to me is Chick-fil-A.
Oh, okay.
To me, Chick-fil-A does this really well because, okay, you know what? We're going to give you something straight up just for joining.
Yep.
So already you get that rush of like, ooh, I got something. I won because I got a free chicken biscuit just for joining. I didn't even do anything.
Yeah.
And then they make it where the points actually do match up to the value that makes sense. So it's not like my credit card, for example, where I had over 3,000 points and I'm like, okay, let me get a statement credit. Yeah, that statement credit is $25.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, that didn't really, that value didn't add up to me. So I think if you are not ready to really create that line item and give away some things and be understanding that it's a marketing tactic, you're not giving anything away for free, you're paying for advertising, you're paying for loyalty, then I think that you might need to try something else, because you're going to end up frustrating your people more than exciting them to be loyal, because they're going to feel like they got kind of gypped.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Anything you wanted to add, Stacy?
Yeah, I think those are such great points, right? Like people really want like they really want to receive value, right? And we understand that, if you are in a credit card program or something and you get, like you said, like 3,000 points, 5,000 points. I had the same thing happen to me. I'm just like, what? It's only like $20? Like, how is that? So people are seeing through deception, right? And I think, that just speaks to where consumers are at in the marketplace these days, regardless of what you're, what kind of method you're doing with marketing. You really have to understand that, consumers want transparency, and consumers can get transparency, right? You can either volunteer and give it up front, like you were saying with Chick-fil-A. It's like, hey, you want to, we understand that, you're valuable, and if you want to join our program, we'll give you something off top. That's great, right? Consumers want that kind of transparency, and they can go find it, right? They can go find it somewhere else. If you're gonna decide to, make your loyalty program, not really valuable and just having one just to have one, or if you've had a loyalty program for a long time and it hasn't really changed much, like understand what people want, right? Ask your people. Ask them, what do they want? How can I make this more valuable for you? And start to do those things. And one of the things I see, I'm, kind of bringing it back to ads a little bit, is when I'm running ads that are there and there's a delayed gratification, those ads don't convert as well unless if there's something up front. And I'll give, like, for example, if you're running ads and you're giving people a coupon, some kind of discount code. I know that Facebook is deprecating the offer ads platform, the offer ads build I believe, I'm not sure if it's already gone or not, but I use those a lot because they worked really well. And I would notice that if I was running ads to people that were where you're like, you have to sign up and then you get a coupon later, they didn't convert as well. But if it's like, if I gave it to you up front and said, hey, here, take this. And, maybe you give somebody something up front, and then maybe if they give you their email address and they join your loyal program, you'll say, hey, I'll bump it up from 15% off to 30% off. Yeah. Then maybe that's a great way to get people in the door and to give people something up front. But I completely agree. Like, consumers now want the value up front because they can go get it somewhere else, right? They don't have to only go to one place, right? We have so many options. And so you really have to start to think of your loyalty program as figuring out how you can make it for valuable people. Why should I even give you my email address, right? Why should I give you my time? Because now as a consumer, I understand how valuable my attention is. So why should I give you my attention? And so that's what the brands have. That's what, brands and I have to work with my clients for, to just figure out how can we provide value up front and so that people will actually pay attention and will actually listen.
I love that because while y'all were talking about your points and all, you automatically made me think about my Amex card, the business Amex, and I have like 1,000 points. But when you go into Amazon, it comes out to like, I don't know, a couple $100. I'm like, what? All these dollars I've been spending, you only give me a couple $100? But I shouldn't complain. I guess a couple $100 are better. But and also on the point of Chick-fil-A is like, yeah, I am one of those consumers. Like, you got to give me something right now, unless like you said, like Chick-fil-A build that brand and is successful for a reason. And I know not everybody listening have a Chick-fil-A, but just imagine like if God had to make chicken sandwiches, it would probably be from Chick-fil-A would be as close as possible to that. So let's shift the conversation into spending here. Let me pull my notes. Okay, it's not here. There it is. So according to eMarketer, I'm a big fan of eMarketer. If you can tell, U.S. e-commerce sales are projected to continue to grow by double digits, up 17.9%. I'm gonna round it up 18% in 2021 to $933 billion of dollars, y'all. E-commerce penetration will continue to increase, more than doubling from 2019 to 23% 24% in 2025. So let's talk about the $1 million question here, budget range. How can a brand, somebody listening into this, a media director listening into this, or I don't know, somebody listening that is trying to grow their brands, what is like the perfect budget to spend into a paid social, including Facebook, anywhere, especially from an e-commerce perspective?
Well, I tell you, it's not $5 a day.
I'm trying to get the secret sauce.
Well, I'll tell you, it's not $5 a day. Okay. That is literally like I think that's the minimum you can go on Facebook. It's $5 a day. And reason, like, I'm sure that people will argue me down that they see success with $5 a day, and that's fine. However, if you are looking to scale and you're looking to get your business to the next level, what you really have to start with is taking into account how much money you're trying to make and how much money you need to make. What are your goals? What is your cost per acquisition, right? Like if you're saying, okay, it costs me $20 to get a customer. Okay, if spending $5 a day is that's going to take you a minute to get one customer, right? That doesn't really translate. So I think, think about what your goals are. Like and if you're brand new, just starting out on paid and you haven't, started at all, I recommend starting at least $20 a day. Because then that gives you some room to actually, get some learnings, to get some people. Think about, like, if you're looking at CPMs, right? Cost per impression, cost per 1,000 impressions. If your average cost per impression is like $5, to reach 1,000 people, and you're spending $5 a day, you're only going to reach about 1,000 people a day. Right. And that's not, and that may sound like a lot in reality. Like if you were in a room with 1,000 people, that would be different. Right. But on the internet and on Facebook, that's really just a drop in the bucket. Right. Like, so I really think you have to kind of look at, like, what are our average costs right now? What is your cost? How much money do you need to make off of this ad? How aggressive are your goals? Right. Like if you are saying like, hey, I want to make, $50,000 in a month, spending $5 a day is really not going to get you there. right? You have to really think about your goals, think about how aggressive you want to be, think about, how quickly you want to learn. Because that's the other thing. It's like $5 a day is a very slow burn, right? You're not gonna learn as fast. You're gonna learn very, very slow. And Facebook's system is gonna be learning very slow, right? The back end, Facebook's system needs time and money realistically to ramp up and to start to learn and to figure out who exactly your ad's gonna resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
So you really need to start to think about like how, is it front loading your budget now? Now with iOS 14 out, that's one of the things that, I've been told to do by Facebook is to front load your budget to really like get some learnings early, and then you can adjust accordingly. Because the data is delayed, and that's why, you just need to get as much data as you can. But, that's what I would say about budget. It's like, think about your goals, think about how aggressive they are, think about what you're paying to acquire a customer now, right? Like maybe you're running Google ads, or maybe you're running advertising in some other kind of capacity.
Yeah.
Think about what your cost for, what does it take for you to acquire a customer, or how much, or what are our current CPMs, right? How many people do you realistically need to start to reach in order to see some success and to see scale? And start your budget a little higher than you would think, because the data is delayed and you can always adjust it over time.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because even in the programmatic media world, like we front load it's very common to front load at the beginning of the month, because it gives us a competitive advantage. You're becoming, you're bidding higher. So they actually advise that almost over 60% of your budget be spent in that first week or week and a half, or that 2 weeks, because you want to be able to get, like you said, catch up to that competitive inventory. But Ebony, did you have anything to add?
Sure. I was going to say, Stacy and I laugh about that question all the time. But yeah, I would say, like, if you're somebody looking at it from a monthly budget, can you take 10% of your month's revenue? Or can you take, at least $500, $750, somewhere along there, if not more? Because at the end of the day, like, it's just like Stacy said, you are dealing with the funnel. And so you're dealing with people who are going to be at different parts of the funnel. And there is a certain amount that you need to delegate at each part of that funnel. So people at the top of that funnel, they literally don't know you. Like, they are cold. And so it's going to take at least like 60% of your budget. I think the breakdown is like 60, 30, 10. So you're going to need at least 60% of your budget just to continue having conversations with new people every single day. And if your budget is $5 a day, and again, like Stacey said, you're only running across 1,000 people, all 1,000 of those people are not going to want to have a conversation with you. So you are severely limiting the amount of people that you can connect with. And the only way you can get people through the rest of the funnel, they've got to start somewhere. So I see a lot of brands like, oh, I'll throw all my money at the sale, or I'll throw all of my money at the purchase. And it's like, your purchase, your cost per acquisition is going to be more expensive, because they simply don't know who you are. They're going to have to see this ad like 50 times before they decide to say, okay, let me go ahead and convert finally. So yeah, I would take the time. The process that they're talking about, I do for my own business. Like, I recently started running ad sprints on anything, things like messaging, things like images. And it doesn't have to be super expensive, but yeah, my budget is somewhere between 25 and 50 a day, because I'm not leaving them on forever. Like, I'm just leaving them on for a little bit. Let me grab the data and see, okay, this isn't working and this is working. So now I can turn this one off. I can turn this one on, and you end up maximizing your budget instead of wasting a lot of dollars and your time, trying to be super frugal, and it's not getting anywhere. So I see a lot of people quit Facebook ads because they're like, oh, see, they don't work for me. I spent $5 and I didn't get $100 sale. It doesn't work for me. Like, no, you just didn't. You got to continue testing.
Yeah. In the words of the great Jeezy, scared money don't make money. So
right.
I would say you got to invest a little something to get a little more of something. And and to add on to that, and then segue conversation to that, then I hear a lot of recommendation towards small to medium-sized businesses on how to start, how to get things going. But from a different perspective, from that $1 million perspective brand, from a manager that's managing millions of dollars in their media, including some social, some programmatic, some whichever you want to mention, or you want to recommend. what would be recommendation for them? Because I would assume that because of the amount of money available, how can they best funnel that funding inside of a Facebook or inside of a TikTok or whichever it makes sense? Like, what is the best recommendation to them? Like, where should they start in terms of like, hey, I got a healthy budget, but I don't think my audience is all in Facebook. Where else should I invest?
So if you're looking to, I would say, navigate outside, you're asking like if they're looking to navigate outside of Facebook, like what other platforms they should be looking into? Is that what you're asking?
Like for instance, there's a rise in TikTokers, Snapchat ads has had a recent update. Who else? Twitter just had an update that I absolutely hate. It looks like Instagram. Twitter, what are you doing?
Oh,
Twitter is trying to come for edges. They're trying to come for edges. It's interesting. So I come
on, Twitter.
I just started with TikTok ads, and it's a new platform, so it's very buggy, and it just
oh boy, yeah,
it drives me crazy sometimes. I'm not gonna lie, but that's where Gen Z is, right? That's where they are. That's where
true.
If that's who you want to reach, that's where you got to go. So I think one of the things you have to think about is, where are your people, right? If they're not on Facebook, let's say, so let's say your people aren't, like, say your customers are Gen Z or, early millennials and stuff like that. And those, and that demographic is not really on Facebook like that. They're not even really on Instagram like that. They are on Snapchat. They're on TikTok. They're probably also on Twitter. Twitter is really, really big with actual like millennials, right? Like, so, if you're trying to reach older folks, you might want to start to look at Facebook. So I think, figuring out who your people are, that's one of the first things I do with my clients before we talk about messaging, before we talk about creative, is like, who are your people? Right. And, as like, when I work with six-figure businesses, and really, like, at this point, you should have an idea of who your people are, right? You should have an idea of what they're into, where they hang out, where they're most engaging with you with, what types of things they're into, where they're reading, what they're kind of their, you're starting to really understand what their lifestyle is, and all that kind of stuff. So really, it starts with figuring out who your customers are and identifying that, and then figuring out where they're at, and then testing different platforms. Like Pinterest is another place that they have an ad platform. I really dislike Pinterest ad platform, but it's just because of the build, right? Like, I just, for me, I've built well over 1,200 different ad campaigns in the last couple years. And so for me, having a build in the back end is really important to me, that I can actually navigate and that works well for me. And so some of these things that I'm necessarily, some of these things that I'm necessarily kind of ranking and thinking about the platforms is really their build, right? But it doesn't speak to whether my customers are there, right? Like, if my customers are there, I'm just gonna have to get the hell over it and just, and build these ads, right? And get there. So really, it starts with just figuring out and understanding who your people are, where they hang out, where they make decisions, right? LinkedIn is another place that's been, great. The organic reach on LinkedIn is like where Facebook's was a little years ago, which is awesome, so it's, but they're building out their ad platform as well, right? So it's like, who are you exactly talking to? Where do they hang out? Where do they make decisions? And then go from there.
I think that's a great point, because like we don't always talk about it out loud, but like, how user-friendly is that ads manager from a professional perspective? Like, we have to follow our consumers and have the relevant message per the relevant platform, but there's a human being managing that platform, managing that strategy, that needs to know what's up. And some of those platforms are not making it easy for us to spend in their platform. So in the case of Pinterest, and even in Twitter, I've run campaign in Twitter, and it was not it's not as sexy as it should be from a data perspective and from an application, like a UI perspective. So that's also a great point into this whole strategy. Is like, it's not only about how you spend the dollars, about how are you going to make sure that the person running that campaign is set for success. And it goes from the platform perspective, like a Facebook, or from an internal perspective, like, how are you equipping that person to make sure they're making the right decision with that coins. So I think that's a great point.
And I think from the $1 million perspective, like, especially for these larger entities, there is an advantage to having more money that, the small and mid-sized businesses can't really compete with.
Yep.
Before having my own business, I worked for a couple of agencies prior, especially one
Mhm.
being a digital agency.
Yeah.
And when you get a large company that says, okay, we have $300,000 to give you, what are you going to do for us? One thing that they can do that I would say smaller businesses can is down to the assets, the
Mm.
creative. You can go and get more professional footage. You can go and get the number that you can get. So the amount of ads that you can
Mhm.
run, whereas a smaller to mid-sized company, they're kind of restricted to what they can get, whether it
Mhm.
be, a couple videos here, maybe something they shot on their phone, maybe something that was created in Photoshop or Canva. You can have now 50. So like you can run 50 ads, you have 50 pieces of creative that you can put out there. You have the team to be able to write 50 different messages based on a strategy. And then even down to your placement, you can afford to experiment with something that maybe, when you have a smaller budget, you have to stay with what you know because you're a little bit more nervous, more careful with that budget. But you can say, oh, take 10% of the budget and go put that on TikTok. We haven't really tried TikTok, but we're willing to take 3 grand because we can afford to and just throw it out there and see what happens. And I think, like Stacey was saying, it goes back to your goals. Be careful with trends. And so
Mhm.
don't just go and jump on something because it's a trend. Go and jump on it and have some purpose behind it. Because even at that scale, lost money is still lost money. It's still
Yep.
money. Even though you might not miss that 3 grand, you could have certainly put that 3 grand towards something else that was working and could have made you 30 more grand. And so I think that's something that I would look at into having an integrated campaign, taking your budget and making sure that I like to have a media plan, especially at that rate when you're spending that much.
Mhm.
Write down how much do you have, what do you want to spend in each? Like, how are you going to break this down percentage wise? And then start to execute on that. And so, if we take that with the front loading that you guys said, now we can start to say, okay, maybe we need to shift that budget based on the front loading, based on the data that we've seen. Now we can start to kind of shift that budget around. But I
Mhm.
mean, the world is your oyster when you really have the budget to be able to create as many messages, as
That's
many
good.
assets as you want.
Mhm. So there's no really secret sauce, I guess. Like I hear a lot of like you have to test it, you have to shift your budget where it works. Social e-commerce should not be your only strategy. Is you shouldn't put all of your eggs into one basket. You should test a different strategies that include channels. You mentioned maybe search, maybe organic, maybe social, you name it, and it's also not all in Facebook. Like you have to diversify. You have to understand your consumer. And so actually that's if I had to recap this conversation, that would be like understand where your consumer is spending the most time and target them there, set a message per there. So on the creative message, and that will be the last question for this podcast, but what can you tell us, like what's the best practice when it comes to coming up with a message? I've seen some really creative messaging out there, especially for like the Instagram shopping. There's like a lot of cool stuff happening. So, what are your like maybe top 3 best practice when it comes to thinking about creating that message that will resonate with somebody on social, anything? What is your perspective on that?
Gotcha. So I would say my top 3 would be, I believe really hugely in empathy and how empathy can inform data and vice versa. So my
Mhm.
first thing would be to really dial into your persona, not just like, oh my God, they drive an Acura, but like really thinking about
Yeah.
motivations and frustrations and what are their goals? What's keeping them up at night? And then
Oh,
that
got
would lead into my number 2 thing, which would be storytelling. So
it.
at the end of the day,
Mm.
no matter how much we try to pretend that robots are going to take over, like in the next couple years, we're dealing with humans, and humans have lots of emotion. And
Mhm.
so, no matter how much we try to say we're going to be objective and non emotional when making decisions, we make decisions based off of emotion. And
Mhm.
so, that emotion should be reflected in the copy, that emotion should be reflected in the asset that you create. You should be
Mm.
telling some sort of a story, and they should find themselves in that story in some
That's good.
capacity,
That's
like
really
in
good.
some way, whether it's you're the person you were experiencing something and they're watching you and they're like, oh my God, I have that too. Or you can talk directly to them and say, did you wake up this morning and you grabbed your coffee and then you realized it was cold and you wish that you had a mug that would just stay hot all the time? Yeah, that's what this is. And so then my third thing would be making sure that it is a very clear call to action. Yes, you want to
Preach.
you
Drop
do
the
want to
mic.
take them on this creative,
Done.
emotional journey, but at the end of the day, you do want them to do something. And so you need to make sure that you pick one, and let them do that one thing from that one ad. The biggest issue that I see is everybody wants to get their money's worth. So they're like, throw 4 different call to actions in the ad. We want them to sign up for our email and then buy something and then share with a friend and then post a testimonial. And that's too much. Those are all different campaigns. Those are all different ads that you can run. But those would be my top 3.
That's an excellent point. Stacy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, for sure. Those are great, for sure. And I think mine kind of relate to that as well. So one of the things I would say is, again, it starts with who your people are. It starts with understanding who they are and what makes them tick. What do they care about? What are they into? What are their pain points? What emails do they love to read? What subject lines do you get the most opens on, right? That people, because those are indications of what people care about and what people, hear. And so your marketing shouldn't be disconnected, right? Just because you send an email about something doesn't mean that you can't also repurpose that in some kind of way, that kind of messaging into a social ad, right? In fact, that's, something that's a great idea is, when you send an email out, target your people also on social, on social, right? So that they see it someplace else, right? An email might go to spam, or it might, they might have 1,000 emails that they haven't read yet, right? But, you can target them there. So I think, that's the first tip for sure, is really just like understanding who your people are. And then the second thing is to spark curiosity, right? So I think that, one of the mistakes I see a lot of times with creative is that people try to sell you everything on the Facebook ad. Right. They try to tell you all the features. They try to tell you all the things. They try to tell you, oh, this is going to be, it's all of the things, right? You try to put so many things into one ad creative. But really your job, for the goal of your creative is to spark curiosity enough to get the person to take an action, right? Like, so I'm on social, I'm on Facebook to be social. I'm not necessarily on Facebook to shop. Right. And so when what you're doing with your ads is you're interrupting people. You're interrupting people from being social. And so because you're interrupting people, you need to give them something that sparks their curiosity enough to make them to take some type of action, which is going to your site. And so that's the job of your ad, right? Is to get them to your site. Your landing page's job is to close the deal, right? That's where you put all the features, all these other things, anything else that your customers care about when they're actually in that phase of, do you have my size, right? Do you have the color that I like? Do you have a size chart? Do you have reviews, right? You don't have to bake everything into the ad. You just have to get them off of social, and then you have to use your landing page to close the deal. So that's what I would say is tip number 2, is to spark curiosity. And I think, tip number 3 is to really like amplify what's working, right? So like if you have influencers, and like influencers are super hot right now, y'all, and Facebook and Instagram are building out so many tools that you can use to amplify your influencers. And so if you're finding that, influencers are posting a lot of your content, they're driving a lot of traffic to your site, they're actually moving product, put some paid dollars behind that, right? Influencers make great creative. And so I guess that's the third tip really is to lean into, to be authentic, right? And these influencers, they know how to make authentic content, right? Like, especially if you're advertising on TikTok, right? Like, don't take some shit from Instagram and just put it on TikTok, right? That doesn't work, right? You need to actually, understand that these creators we're in a creator's world right now, right? They are able to take content and to tell stories, like Ebony was saying, in a way that makes people want to take action and makes people actually excited about things. And so if that's working for you, if that's a strategy that you're trying to lean into, you want to take that and also put that within your, put some paid dollars behind that as well, because that's a great strategy, a great way to amplify your creative. So I guess, my 3 tips were to define your audience, right? Understand who your people are, what they care about.
Yeah.
Create content that sparks curiosity. And then the third tip is to amplify your influencers, or lean into authentic creation and authentic content that you can get from some influencers.
That is great, man. That is so great. We can talk about this subject for like years, like literally. It's so much going on. And then, I mean, you mentioned the Apple update that's probably having a lot of impact on how people are performing any type of strategy, honestly, whether it's e-commerce or none. So let's close the podcast, and let's close this amazing interview with maybe a word of wisdom. What would you give somebody right now, like just to close this podcast? What is one thing you want to leave the audience, our listeners, our viewers with? And it don't have only to be about e-commerce, I have to say, because we're all human beings. So what is something that is on your heart that you want to share right now?
Sure. So I would say get started. And I'm notorious for sitting,
Good.
and even from I literally run ads for a living, and was so
Mhm.
like in a weird
Yeah.
space about running my own.
Yeah.
And I
I
joined
can
a
relate.
program that kind of forces me to
Uh-huh.
take action on my own thing. And so I would say get
Mm.
started. If you're not at a place where you can run ads for the 500 that we said, or the $20 a day that we said, that doesn't mean that you can't get started. Like, it just means
Mhm.
manage your expectations going
Yeah,
into it, and take the $5 a day. If that's all you have, understand that it's going to take you a minute, but go ahead and get the learnings from the $5 a day until you learn enough to go to feel comfortable and say, let me spend 10, and then
hmm,
spend the 10 until you feel comfortable spending the 20, and then spend the 20. And so go ahead and get started, because nobody can buy from you if they don't know who you are. That's probably the biggest mistake
ooh,
that I see,
preach.
is like my friends and my family, oh, that's why my business is not growing, because my friends are not
Yeah.
sharing. Your friends could share 20, 50 times. It's not going to affect, it's not
Yeah.
enough reach. So you
Yeah.
have to have like reach. People, you got to have these conversations every day. And if you're already doing that organically, and you're like, okay, it's doing okay, then go ahead and start having some of those conversations using some paid dollars. Like, just get started.
That's an excellent point. Grant Cardone said you may have an obscurity problem. Like, you have to put yourself out there. So that's a great problem. And Stacy, last but not least.
Yeah, I had like three things come into my head, so I'm just like trying to narrow it down.
Oh,
So what I
Sharon.
think, I think so what I'll leave with is
Uh-huh.
to really like amplify what's working in your business.
Mm,
Mhm.
Like, I think a lot of times people
that's
they
good.
they look at ads as something separate from their business, right? Any kind of paid advertising, right? They're looking at it as something separate from their business, or
Yeah.
separate from their marketing activities, right? Like, you don't see ads and email as something that can actually work together. But like, if your email list is hot, in your email list,
Mhm.
every time you send out an email, people are, dying to get on to sell out your products. Or every time you have a special release and you send an email out, your stuff sells out. Use your ads to actually bump up your email list, right? Get more people who are like your
Mm,
people on that email list, so that way,
mhm,
you can continue to make sales and you can continue to scale, right? That's the
mhm.
that's the methodology behind scaling, right? Like, scaling is not taking pieces of things and making them work individually. It's trying to figure out how can you bring all of your marketing activities together to all march towards a common goal,
Yeah.
or the common thing, right? And so that's one of the things I learned, just, being on a marketing team of, 40 to 50 people, right? Like, we all have a common goal. We all have to work together. We all have to, we have our respective channels, right? And we have our respective things. And the same thing with my clients, right? They all have their respective things. And so I'm working on
Mhm.
like, well, let's bring these things together, right? Like, if I'm helping you with your organic strategy and you have somebody who's also helping you with paid, like, we need to talk to each other. We need to work together, right?
Yeah.
We need to understand what's working on one platform and what's working on, versus what's working on theirs. So I would definitely say, like, figure out what's working in your business, and figure out. And I bet you there's usually a way for you to be able to use ads,
Mhm.
specifically social ads, to really like fill that bucket, and to get more people to take that desired action.
Wow, that's
Love
perfect. We
that.
couldn't have ended any better. But thank you so much for joining us today. This was amazing. If anyone has to reach out to you about any question, how can they do that?
Yes, Stacy.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if I was going first. Okay, y'all. Hey, y'all. Yeah, you can reach me. You can head over to my site. It's stacyzeal.co, stacyzeal.co. And that's where I have all information about where you can work with me. I'm also really active on LinkedIn. So head
Mhm,
over to my LinkedIn page. Definitely, connect with me there. I've been posting a lot of content there lately. And
mhm.
finally, I have a private podcast. So if you are
Yes.
interested in learning how to create a scalable Facebook and Instagram ad strategy for your product-based service-based business, you definitely want to make sure you check out my free private podcast. It talks you through creative messaging. It talks you through audiences. It talks you through all kinds of stuff that you need to put together a strategy that works.
Boom.
So definitely head over to my site. It's on there. It's on my homepage. It's also at podcast.stacyzeal.co. And again, it's STACYZEAL.co.
Perfect. I'll make sure to add this information too in our show notes later on this week. Ebony?
Love it. All right. So if you would like to connect with me, you can go to gracefulgrindstrategies.com. There's 2 L's in Gracefull. So just make sure if you get an error, make sure that you have the second L. And so I work really well with the service-based entrepreneur. I know my stuff about ecom, but if you need ecom, I definitely say go to Stacy. But if you are someone who is doing like a webinar, a launch, you're a consultant, a course creator, any of those, I love to work with basically that audience, and I do full execution. So if you have questions about, I don't know where to get started, or I would like to set up my pixel, because this is the time to make sure you have your pixel so that you can connect with people after they visited your site. You can go to that website. I also do have an Instagram, Gracefull Grind. Again, Gracefull has 2 L's.
2 L's.
And I'm also pushing through on my LinkedIn as well. So I'm trying to put my content out there.
Yeah.
Lots of good info between the 3 of us, really. So make sure you follow everybody on LinkedIn. There's lots of good content out there.
Great. Well, thank you both for coming. This was amazing. Thank you for making the time and sharing all this knowledge. This podcast was probably worth a few thousands of dollars, and you got to hear it here for free. So make sure you share, make sure you subscribe, and follow each of the guest speakers and myself. And on that note, thank you so much for joining. We will talk to you next week. We have the Women in Programmatic, which is an international club. So next Monday, check it out. This is going to be the next and final live podcast panel of the month. So thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Ebony, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thanks, y'all.